I woke up that morning buzzing with excitement. Today was supposed to be the day I celebrated getting into my dream college. I pictured myself walking through the campus, carrying my books, meeting new friends, finally proving that all those late-night study sessions weren't wasted. Sunlight streamed through my window, warming my face, and for a moment, I felt unstoppable. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Then Mom walked in. Lorraine. Her face was cold, unreadable. "Kim, we need to talk about your college plans," she said, her voice clipped. My heart sank before she even said another word. She explained that the family couldn't afford my tuition because my brother, Jared, needed extra support for his career. "We have to prioritize him," she said, almost like she was discussing a bill. I stared at her, numb. My dreams, my future, were being sold for my brother's advantage. I tried to speak, tried to make her see me, but no words came out. The sunlight that had felt warm now seemed cruel. I felt a hollow ache in my chest as the reality hit me. My family didn't see me as important. I was on my own, and for the first time, I realized just how alone I really was. I couldn't believe what Mom had just said. My dreams, my future, traded for Jared's career. I tried to argue, tried to tell her I could work part-time, get scholarships, figure it out myself. But she didn't listen. She shook her head, her expression hard as stone. "Kim, we've made our decision. You have to accept it." I felt my chest tighten, my stomach twisting into knots. It wasn't just disappointment, it was betrayal. The person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, who should have cheered me on no matter what, had decided I wasn't worth the investment. I sat on my bed, silent, staring at the college acceptance letter on my desk. It felt like a cruel joke. Every word I had dreamed of saying, every hope I had nurtured for years, evaporated. Mom left the room without another word. I could hear the front door close behind her, the sound final, like a gavel striking my heart. I was alone. Completely alone. For a moment, I thought I might scream, or cry until I couldn't breathe. Instead, I just sat there, numb, feeling the cold reality of my new life sink in. This was the day my world broke. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every plan I had made for my life, every dream I had nurtured since middle school, felt ripped from my hands. College, my independence, the chance to prove myself, it all seemed gone. All because my family decided my brother's future mattered more than mine. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller with every passing minute. How could they choose him over me? Was I really so worthless that my own mother thought I wasn't worth saving? The thought burned in me like fire, twisting into anger and pain. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. I thought about the teachers who had encouraged me, the friends who had believed in me. I imagined telling them I wouldn't be going to college, that everything they thought I could become didn't matter to the people who were supposed to love me most. I sat up, trembling, gripping my blanket. Maybe I couldn't change my family, but maybe I could still find a way forward on my own. I didn't know how, not yet, but I promised myself I wouldn't let this break me completely. Not yet. Not ever. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out how to fight back against a life that had been stolen from me. The next morning, I tried talking to Mom again. I wanted to reason with her, to make her see that I could contribute, that I wasn't asking for a handout. "I can work part-time," I said, voice shaking. "I can pay for part of my tuition. Please, don't take this away from me." She shook her head slowly, her eyes cold. "Kim, we've already decided. Jared's future comes first. You'll understand when you're older." I couldn't understand. How could she say that? I was her daughter. Weren't my dreams worth anything? I left my room, pacing the hallway, trying to breathe past the lump in my throat. Dad didn't say a word, just drank his coffee and read the newspaper. Even Jared barely looked up, smirking like he'd already won. I felt smaller and smaller with each passing second. By the end of the day, I realized something harsh: my family didn't care about my future. They had chosen him over me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I went to my tiny bedroom, sat on the floor, and made a silent vow. If my family wouldn't fight for me, I would fight for myself. And I would prove that I was worth more than they ever imagined. Days passed like a blur after that. My acceptance letter sat untouched on my desk, a reminder of everything I was losing. I watched Jared leave every morning, confident and smug, driving the car my parents bought him so he could chase his dream. I stayed behind, invisible in my own home. The silence hurt more than words. Mom no longer brought up my future. Dad buried himself in work. Jared acted like my sacrifice was his right. It was like I had been erased from their lives. I still tried to help around the house, cleaning, cooking, anything, but it never mattered. I wasn't their priority anymore. At night, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. I wondered what my life would look like if someone, anyone, had believed in me. The anger built slowly, mixing with heartbreak. It wasn't fair. I had worked so hard. I had done everything right. But as the days turned into weeks, something inside me started to shift. I didn't know how yet, but I promised myself I would find a way out. If they could treat me like I was disposable, then one day, they would see just how wrong they were. I knew I couldn't rely on my family anymore, so I started looking for work. Anything. I just needed money, a way to survive and maybe save enough to reclaim my future. The first job I landed was at a small cafe downtown. I scrubbed tables, washed dishes, and served coffee to strangers who barely noticed me. The first day was brutal. I spilled drinks, dropped plates, and was scolded by the manager for being slow. I felt embarrassed, humiliated, and exhausted. I wanted to quit, to crawl back home and hide, but I reminded myself that home no longer existed in the way I had imagined. I had to survive. During my lunch break, I sat on the curb outside and stared at the sky. The world kept moving while I felt trapped, small, and invisible. But somewhere under the shame, a spark flickered. I wasn't going to let this break me. Not completely. I realized something important that day: no one was going to fight for me but me. My family had abandoned me, but I still had myself. And as miserable as I felt, I made a promise to my reflection in the cafe window: I would prove my worth. After weeks of juggling the cafe and online applications, I finally mustered the courage to apply for scholarships. I poured my heart into every essay, wrote about my dreams, my struggle, and my determination to rise despite my family's choices. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone out there would see me for who I was, not what my family had decided I was worth. A week later, the first rejection email arrived. I read the words over and over: "We regret to inform you." My chest tightened, and the tears I had been holding back spilled freely. Then came more rejections, each one worse than the last. They weren't just saying no to money. They were saying no to me, to my dreams, to the future I had imagined. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mixture of despair and rage. I wanted to scream, to shake someone, anyone, and demand they see me. But I swallowed my anger and took a shaky breath. I knew this moment would define me. I could either let it crush me, accept my worthless status, or I could fight harder than I ever had before. And I decided, I would fight. No one was going to steal my life again. I was sitting on the steps outside the cafe, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, when Miss Harlow, my former English teacher, appeared. She had always been sharp, kind, and slightly intimidating, the kind of teacher who saw right through excuses. "Kim," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I've been keeping an eye on you. You're working hard, but you're spinning your wheels." I looked up, unsure whether to be embarrassed or grateful. She had a way of seeing me without judgment, noticing both my struggle and my potential. She asked me to walk with her to the park nearby and started asking about my dreams, my ambitions, and my life at home. I told her everything, about my mother choosing my brother over me, about the scholarships that rejected me, about the small apartment I rented and the exhaustion that weighed on me. Ms. Harlow listened, nodding, never interrupting. When I finished, she smiled gently. "You have fire, Kim. Don't let anyone, not even your family, tell you what you're worth. I want to help you." That day, I realized I wasn't completely alone. For the first time in months, I felt hope. Someone believed in me. And that belief was going to be my first step toward fighting back. With Ms. Harlow's guidance, I started focusing on building skills that could help me survive, and eventually thrive, on my own. She taught me how to write resumes, apply for better-paying jobs, and even introduced me to online courses I could take at night. Every evening, after my cafe shift, I would open my laptop on the tiny card table in my apartment, my hands shaking from fatigue, and dive into learning. I studied accounting basics, computer skills, and even digital marketing. Each small victory, a completed assignment, a positive feedback email, a certificate of completion, felt like a brick added to the foundation of the life I was rebuilding. It was exhausting, but empowering. I was taking control for the first time in months. Ms. Harlow would check in every few days, offering advice and pushing me when I felt too tired or too discouraged. "You're stronger than you know, Kim. Keep going. One day, they'll see it too," she said. For the first time, I felt like I had a plan. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing to rise. My dreams weren't gone. They were just waiting for me to fight back harder than anyone ever expected. The nights were the hardest. After 12-hour cafe shifts, I would drag myself back to my tiny apartment, stomach growling from skipping dinner, and sit at my folding table to study. My eyelids burned, my hands cramped, but I forced myself to push through each lesson. Accounting formulas blurred together. Marketing videos looped endlessly in my head. Every click of the keyboard reminded me that I was alone in this fight. Sometimes I thought about my family, their comfortable lives, Jared's laugh, Mom's indifferent smile, and anger surged inside me. How could they treat me like this? How could they ignore my future so casually? But I turned that anger into fuel. Every assignment I finished, every skill I learned, was a step away from them and a step closer to proving my worth. Ms. Harlow's voice echoed in my head, "You're stronger than you know." I repeated it like a mantra when exhaustion threatened to take over. Slowly, the hours stretched into progress. I realized survival wasn't enough. I wanted victory. I wanted them to see that I could rise without their help. And even if they never noticed, I would know. That thought kept me going, one long, lonely night at a time. After months of juggling cafe shifts and late-night studying, I finally landed a higher-paying part-time job at a small marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than the cafe and offered real experience. I felt a spark of pride as I typed my first reports and created simple social media posts for clients. For the first time, money didn't feel like a cage, it felt like freedom inching closer. I remember walking home that night, the cool air brushing my face, and feeling a strange sense of accomplishment. I had earned this. No one had handed it to me. No one had invested in me. Every dollar in my pocket was proof that I could survive and thrive without them. At home, I counted my earnings carefully, budgeting for tuition applications, books, and rent. Each decision mattered. Every sacrifice I had made, skipping meals, staying up all night, working double shifts, was starting to pay off. I called Ms. Harlow that evening, barely able to contain my excitement. "Kim, I knew you could do it," she said, pride in her voice. And for the first time in months, I believed her. I was finally taking control. My future, my life, my dreams, it was all starting to belong to me. Even as I celebrated my small victories, a fire began to grow inside me. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to my family that I was worth more than they ever imagined. Every dollar I earned, every skill I learned, became a tool for the life I was building, and a promise that one day, they would regret abandoning me. I spent nights sketching plans in a small notebook, jotting down ideas about how I could rise higher than Jared, how I could make Mom and Dad see that their practical decisions had only fueled my determination. I imagined the day when I would no longer be invisible in their lives, when my success would speak louder than any apology. It wasn't a cruel desire, it was justice. They had calculated my worth on a spreadsheet, measured me in money, and chosen him over me. I would show them that human value couldn't be quantified. I would rise, and I would take nothing for granted. Ms. Harlow noticed my intensity. "Kim," she said, "don't let anger control you. Let it motivate you. Use it wisely." Her words sank in. I had a plan now, and every late night, every sacrifice, was a step closer. One rainy afternoon, an email changed everything. A small startup marketing company was looking for a full-time assistant, someone with digital skills, determination, and a willingness to learn fast. I hesitated only for a second before hitting apply. My hands trembled with hope, excitement, and fear all at once. A week later, I received the interview invitation. I dressed in my only professional outfit, a simple blazer and worn skirt, and practiced answers in the mirror. I couldn't afford to stumble. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to take control of my life completely. The interview was grueling. They asked about my skills, my experience, and my goals. I answered honestly, letting my determination shine. When they asked why I was the right person, I didn't mention my family or the sacrifices I'd made. I simply said, "I won't quit, and I won't fail." 2 days later, I got the call. I had the job. The salary wasn't massive, but it was enough to start saving for tuition, pay rent without fear, and invest in my own future. For the first time, I felt a surge of real independence. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was beginning to thrive. With my new job, I finally had breathing room. I paid off small debts, bought a few books for self-study, and started dreaming bigger. But the fire inside me, my desire to show my family they were wrong, never dimmed. I began quietly mapping out my long-term plan. I documented everything in a leather-bound notebook. My skills, savings, opportunities, and the timeline I wanted to follow. Each step I took was deliberate. Every extra hour I worked, every project I completed perfectly, was a brick in the foundation of my comeback. I didn't want revenge born of cruelty, I wanted it born of undeniable success. At night, I visualized the moment my parents would see me flourishing. Jared's smug smile, Mom's indifferent gaze, they would all fade under the weight of my achievements. I wouldn't need to yell or fight. My life itself would be the message, abandoning me was their mistake. Ms. Harlow noticed the shift in me. "You're not just surviving, Kim," she said. "You're building a life they can't ignore. Keep going." I smiled at her words, but inside, the plan hardened. Every late night, every skipped meal, every sacrificed comfort, all of it was part of my strategy. They had underestimated me. Soon, they would understand. Months of relentless work started to pay off. I was recognized at my marketing firm for taking initiative and improving client campaigns. My supervisor praised my creativity and reliability. I felt a surge of pride that no family validation could ever match. This was my success, earned, not handed down. I also started saving money aggressively. Every paycheck was divided into rent, tuition applications, and a growing future fund. The cafe and the online tutoring gigs still ran in the background, but now I had a rhythm. I was organized, disciplined, and, most importantly, independent. Even more satisfying was the small victories in my personal growth. I no longer panicked when faced with challenges, and I learned to navigate setbacks without feeling defeated. Every no I'd received in scholarships, every cold glance from my parents, every whispered doubt, I used them as fuel. At night, I updated my leather-bound notebook, noting progress, ideas for growth, and potential ways to reclaim what my family had tried to steal. I didn't feel hatred anymore, just determination. My revenge wouldn't be cruel. It would be undeniable. One day, they would see what I had built without them, and their mistake would be impossible to ignore. It was a chilly Monday morning when I got the email that changed everything. A renowned tech startup was looking for a digital marketing strategist. The role was demanding, but the salary and benefits were life-altering. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. This could finally be the turning point. I spent the next 2 days preparing meticulously. I researched the company, practiced answers to every potential question, and refined my portfolio. Every skill I had painstakingly learned, the late nights, the online courses, the sacrifices, they all mattered now. I couldn't afford to fail. The interview was intense. The lead manager tested my creativity, problem-solving, and adaptability. I answered confidently, drawing on every experience I had endured. I spoke of resilience, determination, and the hunger to succeed, letting my story shine without ever mentioning my family's betrayal. 3 days later, the call came. I got the position. I felt a rush of exhilaration. For the first time, I could see the path to true financial independence and power. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The foundation of my revenge was set, built on my own effort, intelligence, and determination. They had underestimated me, and soon, they would see the cost of that mistake. The first few months at the startup were grueling. Early mornings, late nights, constant deadlines, but I thrived. Every successful campaign I led brought recognition, a higher paycheck, and new opportunities. I could feel the tide turning. I was no longer the abandoned girl struggling in a tiny apartment. I was becoming someone who commanded respect. I kept my eyes on the bigger goal. Every dollar saved, every skill polished, and every connection I made was a brick in the empire I was quietly building. I started investing cautiously, learning the ropes of stocks and small business opportunities. Each small win reinforced my belief that I could outgrow the family that had discarded me. Despite my success, I remained focused and humble, hiding my rapid ascent from anyone who might gloat over my past failures. The memory of my mother's indifferent glance and my brother's smug smile fueled me more than anger ever could. My revenge would be quiet, methodical, and undeniable. At night, I updated my leather-bound notebook with plans and projections. The girl who was once deemed too worthless to save was becoming unstoppable. One day, my family would see it, not in words, but in the life I had created from nothing. And that day would be unforgettable. As my reputation at the startup grew, I began attracting attention from industry insiders and mentors. People who had never met me before started offering advice, collaboration opportunities, and even small investments. I realized that success wasn't just about working harder, it was about positioning myself among the right people. One afternoon, during a networking event, I met Mrs. Caldwell, a retired entrepreneur with decades of experience and a sharp eye for talent. She listened intently as I spoke about my vision and goals. When I finished, she smiled. "Kim, you have fire. You're building more than a career, you're building influence. Let me help you navigate the next level." Her guidance was invaluable. She taught me how to negotiate contracts, identify high-potential investments, and expand my reach beyond my current role. She reminded me that wealth alone wasn't enough, influence was power. Every step I took was deliberate. I kept thinking about Mom, Dad, and Jared, their choices, their calculations, their indifference. Each connection, every deal, every new skill acquired was a step closer to proving that I had been underestimated. The girl they abandoned was no longer invisible. I was becoming someone they could never ignore. By now, I wasn't just earning more, I was building influence. My campaigns at the startup were generating major results, and my name began circulating in professional circles. Small investors and entrepreneurs sought my advice, impressed by the strategic thinking I'd honed through years of struggle. I also started investing in side projects, tech startups, small businesses, and even creative ventures. Each calculated risk paid off, increasing my savings and establishing my presence in a network of people who could open doors I'd once only dreamed of. I kept meticulous records, updating my leather-bound notebook with every gain and connection, planning a future that was completely mine. Even though success felt exhilarating, I never forgot the fire that fueled me, the family that abandoned me, the sacrifices I'd made, and the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever be recognized. That memory kept me focused and disciplined. Miss Harlow called one evening, her voice warm. "Kim, you're unstoppable. Just remember, your revenge isn't in anger, it's in what you're building." I smiled, thinking about the day my parents would realize they had undervalued me. That day was coming. My power, wealth, and influence would speak louder than their apologies ever could. By now, I had the money, the skills, and the network. My empire was growing quietly but surely, and I realized it was time to plan the moment that would make my family truly understand their mistake. Not out of malice, but to show them what abandoning me had cost them, and what I had built from nothing. I spent nights drafting strategies. How would I reveal my success without seeming cruel? How could I make sure they knew it wasn't just luck, but years of relentless effort, sacrifice, and resilience? I wrote detailed outlines, calculated timelines, and rehearsed conversations in my apartment, which now felt less like a tiny studio and more like the command center of my life. Each decision was deliberate. I invested in my image, my visibility, and opportunities that could eventually intersect with theirs. I wasn't planning to hurt them. I was planning to rise above, to become undeniable, to let my life itself be the message. Ms. Harlow noticed my focus. "Kim," she said, "you become everything they refuse to see. Don't rush the reveal. Let it unfold naturally. Timing is your greatest weapon." I nodded, smiling at her wisdom. Soon, they would see, the girl they cast aside was no longer invisible. She was unstoppable. I had reached the stage where my wealth and influence were undeniable. Investments, promotions, and side ventures had grown into a small but sturdy empire. For the first time, I felt completely independent. No one could touch my life or manipulate my future again. But independence wasn't enough. I wanted my family to understand what they had thrown away, and for that, I needed security. I hired a trusted financial advisor, someone discreet but brilliant, to manage my accounts and assets. Every dollar was accounted for, every investment protected, and every plan for future growth carefully mapped. At night, I revisited my leather-bound notebook, now filled with strategies, progress notes, and reminders of my journey. I reflected on the years of struggle, skipped meals, endless jobs, and nights spent in exhaustion. Those sacrifices had forged me into someone they could no longer dismiss or underestimate. Miss Harlow called again, her tone both proud and gentle. "Kim, you've done more than survive. You've built a life that speaks for itself. Are you ready for the next step?" I smiled, the fire inside me steady and bright. The empire was ready, my finances secure, and my moment of truth approaching. It was time for them to see that the girl they abandoned had become unstoppable. With my fortune secure and my influence growing, it was time to plan the reveal. I didn't want a simple confrontation, I wanted a message that would resonate, a reminder of the years they had underestimated me. Every detail had to be perfect. I started by arranging subtle hints. My name appeared in industry articles, my achievements highlighted on professional networks. Mutual acquaintances were casually informed of my success. I didn't brag, but I made sure the story could reach those who had once turned their backs on me. Every step was deliberate. I checked my finances, ensuring that the fortune they ignored was untouchable. I documented my journey from abandonment to triumph, highlighting the grit and determination that fueled every decision. At night, I imagined their reactions, the shock, the guilt, the realization of their mistake. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about revenge fueled by anger. It was about showing them that I had become everything they refused to support, that life could not be calculated in dollars alone. Ms. Harlow's voice echoed in my mind, "Kim, the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's undeniable success." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Soon, they would see, and nothing would ever be the same. The day finally arrived. I sent an anonymous press release about my philanthropic initiatives and growing fortune. Within hours, news outlets were buzzing. My name was everywhere, Kim Jake, the self-made entrepreneur who had overcome abandonment, debt, and betrayal. It wasn't long before my family noticed. Mom called first, her voice trembling. "Kim, is that really you?" I saw the articles. I let the silence stretch, letting her guilt hang in the air. I didn't need to answer immediately. Jared's message arrived next, filled with disbelief and self-importance. "How is this possible? Mom and Dad did everything for me." I read it quietly, feeling the satisfaction of years of struggle culminating in this moment. I didn't reply. Words weren't necessary. Then came Dad's call, his tone sharp but unsure. "Kim, we didn't know. We want to talk." I let him stumble over his words. The girl they had deemed worthless had grown into a force they couldn't ignore. I smiled, closing my leather-bound notebook, the chronicle of my journey. The revelation wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. They had abandoned me, but I had built a life that proved my worth. And now, for the first time, they understood. I finally agreed to meet them, not out of obligation, but to show them the life they had ignored. I chose a quiet cafe, neutral territory. My heart raced, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Mom was the first to arrive, her eyes wide and filled with unspoken guilt. Jared followed, stiff and defensive, trying to hide his discomfort behind a forced smile. Dad arrived last, his posture rigid, as if he could still calculate my worth in dollars. I let them talk first, listening as they fumbled through apologies and excuses. "We made mistakes," Mom said, voice trembling. "We didn't know how to help you." Jared tried to argue, but I raised a hand. "Stop. I'm not here to argue," I said calmly. "I'm here to show you what happens when someone refuses to give up, even when abandoned." I shared my journey, every job, every sleepless night, every investment, and every small victory that led me to financial independence. Their eyes widened as they realized the scope of what I had accomplished without their support. Finally, I smiled gently. "I've forgiven you, but I'm no longer yours to control. My life, and my worth, are mine." Years of struggle, abandonment, and perseverance had led me here. The half-sham foundation I established was thriving, helping hundreds of patients abandoned by their families, giving them hope and support. I finally understood that true power wasn't just money, it was impact. I kept my fortune secure, investments flourishing, and my influence growing, but my heart was focused on giving others a chance I hadn't been given. Each success was a reminder of every late night, every sacrifice, and every lesson learned when I had nothing. I no longer needed my family's approval. Mom, Dad, and Jared had finally acknowledged me, but it was irrelevant. I had built a life that could not be ignored. I had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into motivation, and despair into triumph. As I sat in my office, the city lights reflecting off the window, I touched the photo of the little girl I once was, the girl abandoned, but never defeated. I whispered to her, "We made it." They couldn't calculate our worth, but we proved them wrong. And now, we help others do the same. My journey had begun with heartbreak, but it ended with strength, independence, and a legacy that no one could ever take away. I was unstoppable. I was Kim Jake. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.